Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Chris. I'm here with Jason, and we want to welcome you to the inaugural episode of Unchained Cinema. So, this has kind of been the brainchild of something we've been working with over the past few months or so because we're both big fans of cinema. We're by no means professional critics or anything like that. We're just two guys who like movies and have opinions, right? So, I'm gonna
Yes, sir.
throw it over to Jason.
Hey, what's up, guys? Jason. And as Chris said, we've been just friends for a long time. Our conversations always kind of end up evolve around music or movies over the course of the last couple of years. And so this kind of organically just kind of had happened that we said, you know what? Let's kind of do something where we can talk about some passions of ours and see where it goes. And so I think that's a good opportunity. As you can see behind me here, personally, I'm a big fan of film, and we're gonna probably talk about that more down the road. But when Chris suggested this not too long ago, I was like, yes, let's look into doing that. And so this will be the first time we did this, so we're looking forward to it, and we definitely enjoy feedback off this first episode for people who watch. So thank you very much for taking the time to give us a gander.
All right. So the movie that we settled on was called Bomb City. It was released in 2017. It was written by Jameson Brooks and Sheldon Chick, which was, for all intent and purposes, their first full-length feature debut. They've done some, short films in the past, but this was their first full-on, full-length project. It was directed by Jameson Brooks, and it's an independent film. So naturally, this had been sitting in my queue on Tubi for probably the last 2 or 3 years. I always kind of have a hard time with independent films. The whole style over substance kind of bothers me. But this was released on Brooks and Chick's independent Third Identity Films, and surprisingly received 13 awards and 2 other nominations. As far as the cast goes, for the most part, it was relatively unknown people. You had Dave Davis, who plays the main character, Brian Deneke, who you probably recognize from The Walking Dead, True Detective, and Lucifer. So he's more of a TV guy. And then you had Glenn Morshower, who's more of a supporting actor. He played the defense attorney, and he was in 24, Transformers, Moneyball, and the show Friday Night Lights. And then, kind of a side note, you had Robbie Lawler, the former UFC fighter who played one of the cops. So it's just kind of one of those fun facts. Interestingly enough, one of the victim's brother, Jason Deneke, was actually in the movie as well. So if you don't know what you're looking at, you wouldn't recognize him. But he just played one of the bouncers. What were your thoughts going into this one, Jason?
Well, honestly, you're the one who suggested this. The artwork caught my attention because the thumbnail they used on Tubi had like a punk rock kid, full on mohawk. It says the graphic says Bomb City, so it definitely catches your attention. And so I was definitely aware of the film, but I did not, like you, when it comes to a lot of independent cinema, I have a hard time getting excited about it because I feel like sometimes like you said, substance versus, what the actual movie, if it's a good movie or not, gets lost. Because they sometimes the subject matter is not to my taste, let's say. So when you suggested and you gave me like a little brief synopsis of the film, I was like, okay, I think I will like this. And I could tell in the very first few minutes of the movie, I was like, yes, I'm going to dig this movie. We'll get more into it here shortly, but I was like, this is a great, introductory film for the show and for the channel. I feel like both of us, can relate to these characters, relate to this time frame, and I feel like it's still very pertinent to our society. It was a very much a subject matter of that time, but it is still relevant today. And I know that you mentioned it. The film was made in 2017, but it takes place in 1997. And so I was a junior in high school that year, and I won't get too far ahead, but the main character in this movie, what it's about, him and I are the exact same age. We both were born in 1978. So that was a very, like, when I saw that, I was like very it hit me really hard, which we'll talk about a little bit more here in a few minutes. about that connection, because him and I were the exact same trajectory of life, experience, and all that when this had happened in '97. So it was very much hit pretty close to home.
Okay, yeah. So the plot, as you said, is it's based on a true story and primarily focuses on a punk rock guy from North Texas, Brian Deneke, who was played by Davis. And they were living in Amarillo, Texas. And as the movie progresses, so does the escalation of conflict between the punks and the jocks. And if you do the research, kind of the behind the scenes stuff, it wasn't just the punks that were having issues with them. It was basically anybody who was on the fringes of society, your goths, probably your heavy metal guys. If you weren't that kind of clean cut, go to church every Sunday, part of daddy's freaking little country club, you kind of fit into this other pot of people that they always messed with. And then the story kind of climaxes when one of the football players, and in the movie his name was Cody Cates, and he was played by Luke Shelton. In real life they decided to change his name. His name was actually Dustin Camp. He purposely runs over Brian Deneke during one of these altercations. So that's kind of a down and dirty and on the plot of the movie. I personally thought the flow of the movie was really good. I thought the beginning was kind of long and drawn out, but then once you get to the end of the movie, you understand that they were really doing well to set the tone and the landscape for the rest of the movie. I thought that the production and the direction were on point, like together, because sometimes you see them, they kind of work against each other, but it was very fluid. I think the movie does a good job of presenting themes without bashing you over the head with it. I thought they did a really good job with that. But it's a movie that you kind of have to actively watch. It's not highly interpretive, like a, kind of an artsy fartsy film, because it is based on a true event. But when you actively watch it and then you get to see the story behind it, you can see how much research that they actually did. I think if you only watched it once, you weren't really getting what they were trying to do. But what was your thoughts?
Yeah, man, I felt like a lot of the same thing I felt like a lot of the same things that you had said. I felt like, they did a good job putting like this vibe of the other versus the haves and have-nots. I feel like that was a big thread throughout the film. I went back and read some news stories about the reality of it, and they said that all the family and friends involved in what had happened to Deneke, they said that the movie itself had they said that it really captured the vibe of what was happening during that time. So it wasn't too exploitative. They weren't trying to like make it too Hollywood or too like, movie. They kept it based in reality. So not too much of the story was sensationalized, so to speak. And so they really captured the tenor of what was happening, which made it feel even more realistic. It wasn't, over the top, like you said. It was very much based in like a real life scenario. And I can tell you, I'm from Indiana. I grew up in Indiana, and I know that's not Texas, but there was, and I was saying before, there was this exact same vibe that was going on in my life, in my high school at the same time. So there was a ton of parallels. I mean, it was kind of creepy. I'd never seen this movie. I didn't know anything about the story. But I feel like if you've grown up in the 90s, I feel like if you went to anywhere near a large size high school, that you probably had some very similar scenarios to this situation, because there's enough students, so there's enough diversity and diversity of thought, diversity of, of people, of cultures and colors and religions or whatever. So you can easily see where people can kind of go off into their own groups. So I thought this was a good movie that really captured that. One of the things that I wanted to hit on was that they did a good job, like you were saying at the beginning of the movie, to show that all these kids are a lot of maybe not all of them, but a lot of them are coming from like middle class white families. This wasn't like some like lower income kind of like rough parents hate them. They don't have any parental figures. It was a little bit of everybody. They showed families and showed them interacting with one another. And I thought that was a good job of that because you actually cared about these characters and what's going to happen to them later. So they did a good job of that. They also did a good job. Do you remember the scene? I was going to ask you, Chris. Do you remember the scene where that shows the football game and it intertwines the punk rock show?
It's funny you say that. Yeah, that was
And I want to
actually
ask you before I give my opinion. I want to ask you what was your initial thoughts when they did that?
it didn't dawn on me at first, but as I was taking my notes going through this thing, I was like, they are showing the parallels between these two different cultures, essentially. Um, it showed how they both kind of expressed aggression in their own way. Um,
Yes.
Similar fashion, but in completely different venues where you have them beating the crap out of each other on the football field, and then you have them beating the crap out of each other in the mosh pit. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was really powerful. And that the fact that they even overlaid the school band over the punk show because they both have
Yes.
music, right? So, like
Yes.
I said, it was a really good it was a good montage that showed that how they don't like the Venn diagram, like they're effectively working to do the same thing just in different ways. But I also agree with your assessment on caring for the characters, and I think a lot of that stems from the fact that the family of Deneke and his friends work so closely with the directors.
Right.
And they actually got permission from the family before they even started writing it because they knew if they didn't have the family on board, then it wasn't going to happen.
Sure.
And if they did, it would be in vain almost because some people don't want that story told necessarily. Um, but yeah, I think it was done very well because of that dynamic. And I think the mom and dad have actually seen the movie like 6 or 7 times.
Oh,
Um, and the casting was really good. And I think that's another part that adds to it. Like I said, you don't know these people, but if you look at like side by side comparisons of the actor and the real person, Jason Deneke looks just like Jason Deneke from the movie. And
yes.
the same thing with Brian. And a matter of fact, a couple of his friends, like when they did the filming, because a lot of it was done in Dallas, but they did some shoots in Amarillo, and they like Davis's costume and whatever else. They were like it was like he was living with us again. He walked like him, he talked like him, had the same demeanor. So Brian Davis had a little bit to go off of in terms of what this person was like, but when somebody's no longer there, it's kind of hard to capture that. So I don't know how he did it. I don't think he does. But even his mom said it was like we had Brian back just for that little bit of time.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point because they picked actors that you didn't know. So you could easily put yourself in that situation because you don't know who these people are. If they would have taken like the hot 20 something actor or actresses of that 2016 2017, it's going to take you out because you're like, oh, I know that person's been on the CW channel or that person's in the new like hot new TV show or movie, and it kind of takes you out of it. I mean, you're like, who would, it's like Tom Cruise or like Tom Hanks or something or whatever. You can't like think of this person as a real person because you're like, this is Tom Hanks or Brad Pitt or whatever, right? So they did a great job of picking someone that you don't know who they are, and you totally believe them as the character they're playing. So it's easy to watch and be transported to this time because you're like, this is like real. This feels real, opposed to being a movie, even though you're watching a movie. Um, I think the way you're talking about the music between the band and the punk rock show was awesome. It showed the things I wrote down was that it showed punk rock kids are just like everybody else. Kids that might not be your typical Friday Night Lights kids at the football games or at basketball games. And, they're not out there with the cheerleaders and they're not out there with all the upstandable citizens of the community. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're terrible people just because they look different or dress different. They show them having families like we talked about. They show they have loving mom and dad. They have friends. They have the same problems that everyone else does. They have girlfriend problems, they have friend problems, they have family problems. We all can experience that. That's not an exclusive thing. And I think that humanizing people was a good way of doing this. That these guys, even though they looked, and I'm sure you remember the defense attorney was trying to make it out to be what they look like. Like somehow that was the problem. That was the reason why it was okay for what happened, because they didn't look the part, so to speak. And I think they did a good job at the beginning of the movie to show you, these are just good kids. They just don't look like everybody else. So yeah, they do things that are, necessarily are bad, but guess what? So is the other people. But we don't want to see it that way, They show them drinking and partying at a punk rock club or at their house or whatever, and they're like little like hangout spot. But then and then like how they were getting harassed by the cops or whatnot. But then they got the jocks and all the the preppy people, whatever. They're out in a big old farm barn area, open field, drinking, partying. The cops show up. They're just like, hey, have a good night. Let's break it up. And it shows you that dichotomy of the two, where the cops is like trying to kick the door down and harassing them, and they're doing their own thing. And even though it's illegal and it's wrong, don't get me wrong, is they shouldn't be doing it, but they were getting the harassed for it and like trying to get arrested and whatnot. But the other people, they literally get caught by the police with their hands in the cookie jar, and the cop helps clean up the whole situation. Like, all right, guys, let's call it a night. We'll see y'all tomorrow. And it shows you the difference between the two. Kids partying, doesn't matter where you're from, it's not correct and it's not right, but it shows that there's protection for sometimes for certain groups and other protections that aren't given to other groups.
Yeah, I liked, and that's what I had in my notes. I liked how they showed kind of the degeneracy of both sides.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was really balanced.
Yes.
And I read in an interview that the director, he admits, he's like, I told this story strictly from the perspective of the punks, but that he didn't really want to demonize the other side either. He kind of wanted to let the audience make up their own mind. I thought they did that very well. It was very humanizing. They could have very easily done a good versus evil scenario where, Cody Cates is, this perpetual jerk, and Brian is the saint of a person who just happens to dress weird. And I think we all have known people like that, and I definitely understand how the cops treated the two different groups differently. I'm from Michigan, and I saw that growing up. You got football players getting high on the football field, on a Friday night, and the cops just make it go away. Had that been, any one of my friends, because I kind of fit, I wasn't a punk. I was more of a metal kid. But if that'd been me or one of my friends, I guarantee it wouldn't have gone down the same way. So that's a part of our society that's always frustrated me, that there's two different standards. And getting back to the defense attorney, man, that guy did a good job, because I hated him from the first sentence he said. I don't remember what it was, but I was like, this guy is something else. And then when he said that, is this what his parents deserve? And it's like, what does this have to do with Cody Cates's parents? Nothing. Because he tried to paint them as, the country club people that, are upstanding citizens in society. And how can you do this to them? And it's like, well, I mean, how could their son do this to this other person? I mean,
and what about his parents?
Right. Right. So, but another part of this I thought was interesting was the way they named it. And I didn't know what Bomb City was. I thought it was kind of an odd name. But apparently the city of Amarillo is really where it gets its name, because they have, I don't know if this is still true, but they had the only nuclear weapons assembly plant in the United States. So when he's talking about, uranium under the ground, getting ready to blow up as we speak, that's what he's talking about. And I didn't pick up on that. I didn't know the Pantex plant was there. But you'll note it was also the name of the hangout that they would go to. And if you look at the economy in Bomb City or Amarillo, a lot of places have taken on that Bomb City as part of their name. But in addition to that, I think it also speaks to the events themselves, right? It's that place was a powder keg, waiting to go off. It was looking for a fuse, and you have this explosion, which ends up in the death of Brian Deneke.
Yeah, I think that's very true. It's a great way of looking at it, because I didn't even think about that till you said it. But as soon as you started talking about it, I'm like, yep, there it is. That's a great observation. But yeah, I completely agree. And I think that, again, I have to just say that I thought the film did a good job of showing you, especially in small towns or like small communities in general, about the feeling of the haves and the have-nots, and showing you how, and there's a stark reality for a lot of these kids and people in general about how how people can perceive you, you know. And if you're from a family that is more well-to-do, or they think of themselves in a higher society type mentality, then, and if you're you're connected in certain ways, that you have a little bit of a feeling of superiority. You have a little bit of feeling of like you're bulletproof. You can get away with stuff. You have people who might look out for you in a way that you wouldn't if you don't have those same kind of protections, or know the right people or whatnot. And I also think the one thing I took away from it was that, you know, that you can look however you want to look, right? Whatever that look is, that doesn't change what we all go through. You know, it's going to be a lot of the same experiences in high school. That's what we're talking about here. These kids are high school age kids, right? And I think that so many people get hung up, even still today, with the way people look. And if they don't look a certain way, then they might be degenerates, or they're not as good as, Blake or whoever, this like, upstandable citizen, at the high school, the star quarterback. But you're the kid who shows up with the hardcore t-shirts, or the straight edge, or the punk rock, or whatever, and people, treat you differently because they think of you in a that you have to be some kind of reject. And I think they did a great job of saying, again, this happens. And and if you don't experience it, that's great, but it definitely it does happen. So I did like it from that perspective. I also thought, like you said, they didn't beat this over the head, but I also thought it was interesting about how we see the first touch of brush with reality when they go to that restaurant, and the guy, they go in to make a phone call or whatever, and you first introduce them to this conflict kind of at the restaurant, and the punk rock kid goes in there, and they're like calling him all these names, making fun of him, or whatever the football players are at the diner. And then they come back and they keep giving him a hard time, and then they all come in and start giving those guys a hard time and like calling them out. And you can see that conflict, and it shows you that no one's perfect. These kids are just, like you said, it's a bomb city, it's a powder keg ready to go off. It just takes one situation to escalate it to the next level to make the whole thing blow up. And even the girl says that while she's on the stand, was that this has been going on for a while, but she never thought it would escalate to the point where it did. And I don't know what you were like in Michigan. I don't know what it was like in Michigan, but in Indiana, where I grew up in Southern Indiana in the 90s, again, straight edge punk rock hardcore was super popular. I mean, I went to all these shows. Like when I saw these kids at this punk rock show in Amarillo, that was like me, in Louisville, Kentucky. Every weekend I'm going to shows. I'm going to punk rock. I'm going to hardcore shows. I'm going to straight edge shows. I saw bands from all around the United States, all around the world were coming into town. And I know that's not what this video is about, but I mean, I could completely relate to the young kids showing up. They want to hang out with like their brothers and sisters, bring them, because most of these shows were all age shows, especially straight edge shows were all age shows. So a lot of times, because there's no alcohol involved, so a lot of times they would put on the flyer all ages. So you could be 55, or you could be 15, you could be 12. It would not matter. And so I thought it was really cool like that. And so I experienced that in that life every single day throughout the mid to late 90s. And I would travel around with bands all around the Midwest to watch them play in all these little like venues and mom and pop, bars and like churches and like, American Legion halls and all this kind of stuff. And it was an amazing experience. I mean, people's houses, we would do shows at people's houses. And so I could very much relate to that. It was a really amazing. And at the end of the movie, I don't know if you watched this, but at the very end, they show the last, like during their credits, like real caught on video of these kids' lives during the 90s at these shows and them hanging out on like camcorders they recorded or whatever. And I was like, this is like exactly what my home videos looked like in the 90s. And me and my friends hanging out at shows or at each other's houses and recording these, bands coming through, all these hardcore bands. And I was like, wow. That was like literally something I could go to my mom and dad's house right now and pull all those tapes. And I would have that exact same type of montage if I wanted to do it.
Yeah, I didn't really have that experience. Punk was not really big where I was at. If you know the music that came out of Michigan in the 90s, it was primarily heavy metal, death metal, and alternative. That's kind of stuff like the Verve Pipe, Somber, Summer Dying, Kid Rock, Eminem. Eminem kind of changed the dynamic of Michigan music. And then the ever-present Insane Clown Posse, Yeah, right. You get to take credit for that one. Yeah, the Nuge, Madonna.
Yes, like a virgin, baby.
Sure. But I got into the music scene much later, but still punk was not a big part of it. I really didn't get into punk until I went to Okinawa. That was really my first exposure to it. I listened to things like Rancid, Black Flag, Dead Kennedys. I listened to those things, but I wasn't really exposed to it in a live capacity. If you wanted to go to those shows, you'd have to go down to Detroit, and I lived in the suburbs of Lansing. So, I had an 82 Dodge Ram Charger and I was getting paid $5.15 an hour. I didn't really have a whole lot of disposable income as a high school kid. So, now, I mean, as far as I know, the Michigan music scene is still alive and well, but punk just never really took hold up there. We had punks in our school. It was a group of about 4 people, I mean, I only had, I think, 400 kids in my high school. So, it was small and it was cliquey. We didn't really have the same dynamic per se where I was at, where you had this grudge against the punks and the jocks and everybody else. We all kind of went between the tribes pretty freely. As a metal guy, I played football and I'd be listening to Deicide in the locker room, and the quarterback's getting into it. So we didn't really have that. I saw it, but just not in my hometown. Sure. When you get into the city, it's a little bit more like that. But I think you have, when you're in a small town like I was, there's only so many people, and most of us had gone to school together since we were in kindergarten. So everyone pretty much knew everybody.
Right. Well, it's harder to treat somebody not human when you grew up with them. It's hard to do that, even if you don't like them, or you can be like badmouth them. But would you really want to take it to the extreme of fist fights and trying to hurt each other all the time? Probably not, because even though you might not get along, you've known each other since you're like, sharing crayons in kindergarten or something. So it just doesn't make sense. But you get more like that when you have bigger schools and a bigger community. My high school, I was, my graduating class, and this might not be big for other people who might be watching or listening, but it was 2,200 kids, and my graduating class was like 600. And so, there was a lot more kids, and I see this all the time. There were defined groups and I was in the straight edge punk rock hardcore skateboarding group. And then you had certain sections of our high school that were, who were like the theater kids like us, and like the punk rock kids. You had other sections that were like the jocks. You had other kids that were like into the country, like they lived on the outskirts of our community, or were like more like from like a farming background, even though we didn't really have any of that farming background, but that's like what they identified as, you had kids that were mostly the black kids would hang out together. You know, we had a huge, you know, our school was super diverse. They had a lot to stick together. You know, you have all the kids that were like potheads all hanging out together. I mean, it was defined areas in my high school. I mean, big time. So that's why I can relate to this, because I would be in situations where we would have to, you know, stand up for ourselves. And since we were such a big group, thank God it never got to be these situations we saw in Bomb City. But I can only imagine if our group was much smaller, like in the movie, that we would have been overrun by the popular football type kids, you know, easily. But, you know, because there were so many of us too, that it was just like a lot of shouting and, trying to, what do you kind of like, what do you call it? Like kind of just like chest up, beat your chest kind of thing. And then, people would disperse and people would stop talking about it. But I mean, I remember seeing fights, I remember getting in fights when we have fights with people like hit each other with skateboards out there and get into fights and stuff. It would be in the parking lots. I mean, it would happen. I mean, again, nothing to this level, of course. But I mean, it would be a thing, So I definitely, like I said, that's why I feel so strong about this movie. And I'm glad you told me about it, because I would never have probably watched that movie. And just the fact that I have so many parallels that I can understand and see, it was like I said, pretty eye-opening. And knowing that it's based on a true story makes it even more like powerful.
Yeah. Well, I suppose, if you have a football team that actually has bragging rights because you actually win games, that might have been a little different in my town, but we didn't. Like, we pretty much played Iron Man football, and I played my freshman year, but because I was in the drum line, I couldn't play after that because there was scheduling conflicts. We went 7-2, and we were like the talk of the town for years to come. It was like the best record they had in like 20 or 30 years. But I was a 5'6", 170-pound lineman, so I kind of saw the writing on the walls anyway. There's really nowhere for me to go in this. I'm just not big enough.
Right. That's awesome.
But
so I was going to ask you real quick. So we talked about the defense attorney and how he did such a good job of making you hate him. Well, and then I thought it was really good when they showed the other attorney and like he said, I thought he did such a great job presenting the case to the jury of like why he believes, this kid should, go to jail. And then like he had such a powerful, I thought again, a powerful closing argument. And then you had the other attorney, but like you said, basically just saying that, this kid's a punk. He got what he deserved. That was the Cliff Notes version. Like he literally says in his closing argument that what this upstandable young citizen football player did, well, he did a service for the community by taking this kid out. And now I don't know if that was exactly the words this guy used for the actual trial or not. But the fact is that that's the mindset that these people have. And it was very powerful to hear that. And the fact that they still, and we haven't got to this part, but I guess I'll go ahead and kind of talk about that kid got off and that he served no jail time. Essentially, it was just like a slap on the wrist, if you can even call it that. It was shocking. So to talk a little bit about that, what was your thoughts when you watched that movie? You saw the outcome of the trial. What was your initial reaction?
Well, I thought the prosecutor, I thought he was about to cry at any second. Yes. I don't know if it was supposed to be that way or not, but I was like, man, is this dude going to break down? But, he did have a very good closing argument. And what this kid did was completely indefensible. And the fact that there was somebody that was willing to defend him, especially in the fashion that he did, if you look at why the legal system is there, it's to make sure that the punishment fits the crime, not to get people off. And I think we've kind of lost our way in terms of that being our judicial system. But he got off on 10 years probation, a $10,000 fine that was dropped, but he did actually do jail time. He served 5 years.
But not because of what had happened. What happened? Why did he serve 5 years?
If I remember right, I've seen different things for sure drinking underage again. He was caught drinking underage, but then I heard he was evading police. So I don't know if he was trying to like get away or what, because there's not a lot of detail. But he
Yeah,
did
what I
serve
read
the.
was that while on probation, he didn't keep up his probation request, like keeping in touch with the person, whoever your like go-to person is when you're under probation and when you're on that tight leash. Like he broke probation protocols, and so he had done so many apparently infractions that it caused him to go to prison for 5 years. But to your point, the fact is that he had 10 years and $10,000 fine, and that he didn't serve any jail time for what he actually did. He didn't have to pay the money. Is a slap in the face to what actually happened. And so, yeah, I haven't. I'll talk more later. But anyways, yeah. So please continue. I apologize.
No, I'm just, and I can't help but kind of humanize this person. It's easy to demonize somebody when they've done something as dastardly as that, right? But you got to wonder. You have to think on some conscious or subconscious level that was killing him. And I think I mean, how do you live with yourself after that? And then people are openly hating you because you and everybody else knows that your ass should have gone to jail.
Right.
Which has probably led to some level of alcoholism, because it seemed like he drank with his friends, but it didn't seem like it was like the guy that had the liquor dispensing truck. I mean, I don't think it was like that guy. But he had to live with himself.
Right. Well, there's that scene where the girl talks about it, and apparently this is a real thing that he had said while she was in the car. He said something that he's a car ninja. Or he's
I'm a ninja in my caddy.
Yeah, I'm a ninja.
He actually said that though.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like it took an actual, in a real statement he made, and they put it in the movie. But the fact is, he knew what he was doing. Now, like you said, did he know he was actually going to kill the guy? Who knows? But what he did was on purpose. The fact is that there was no debating that aspect of it. Like everybody agreed that he did what he did on purpose, but he still got off for it. So the fact is, not only did he do it on purpose, that he actually said that he was a ninja in his caddy or whatever, that he was doing it joyfully almost. Now in the movie, it shows him like smiling and like getting off on it almost. Now I don't know, that might be 100% made up. Now, but the fact of the matter is, he had no problem doing what he did. I mean, he did it on purpose. Was there glee in his joy? Was he laughing? Was he smiling? I don't know about that. But the fact of the matter is that he was joking about it right before he did it. Is all you need to know with what this guy's heart is all about.
Well, then
he was wanting to hurt this person.
After he did. After he did, he's like, I bet he liked that one.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, it was just crazy. The only problem I had with the movie, and again, I know it was a movie, so they try to make it a little bit more like hit the home run or take it home for you, was that I went back and researched a few like articles about what had happened, and the only thing that didn't line up, and maybe you saw something different, was that in the movie it showed that at the end, with that same cop who told everybody to go home and just kind of like pretend it didn't happen, all the jocks and all the football players and all that, told everybody to go home from their party out in the field or whatnot. That same cop shows up at the parent's house with that kid, and he whispers to the other police officer like, "Hey, we got a problem here. Let's get this cleaned up." So he like basically like cleans up the car so it doesn't look as bad, like he wasn't drinking, and he like cleans the blood off the car and all that. That they allude to the fact that this to make it look like it wasn't as bad as it was. And that to me is like, of course, I mean, obviously that's super illegal. The cop is helping this kid get out of trouble or not make it look as damaging to him. And so they're like gonna like clean up the car a bit and kind of make it not look so bad. And I'm like, that wasn't what I saw in the actual report. I didn't see that. So of course they put that in there to make the cops look even worse than they would have normally. So I didn't like that too much because I felt like it was just as powerful without that scene. What do you think?
About that part, I didn't pick up on the cop was trying to clean it up. I just saw that he was going through the car and he's like looking at his kids like, dude, you're screwed. That's what I picked up from it.
I just felt like it was a little bit like, he was there to help him out. I don't maybe but that's good though. The way we both watched the same movie and we kind of walked away with two different
Interpretations.
It's like like two people watch a train wreck or a car wreck and we see two different things. So it's the exact same wreck, but we look at it from two different perspectives. So I kind of like maybe they did a good job because I already didn't like those cops after the whole thing earlier in the movie. And I feel like the cops there to like kind of try to help schmooze them over a bit. Like, hey, let's help this kid out a little bit, and make it not look so bad for him. So yeah, but yeah, it was interesting that aspect of the movie. But yeah, I don't know how that kid could survive in that town after what had happened. Like, how can you show up?
He lives in he graduated.
Yeah.
And apparently like he was getting cheered as he graduated.
Yeah,
I was in no means trying to justify what this kid did. I was trying to get into his headspace of why he would continue to drink after something like that. Because after something like that, you kind of start reevaluating your life a little bit.
You would hope.
But it doesn't seem like he did. But I think a lot of it had to do with depression and anger and frustration and depression. And you can't do something like that to somebody and then just walk away feeling okay with it. I don't subscribe to that at all unless you're
sociopath.
A sociopath, yeah.
Right.
But that's what you were talking about, how we both watched this and got two different interpretations. It's just like the movie itself. There's three sides to every story. Right. There's side A, side B, and the truth.
Yep.
Side A and B are always going to be skewed by your vantage point, your life experiences, your opinions, your views, everything. But as far as what I really liked about this movie was the Manson speech, the Marilyn Manson speech. I didn't agree with everything he said. I listened to the whole thing in its entirety because they condensed it for the movie, obviously. I think that thing goes on for like 15 minutes. But he does ask a lot of good questions within that, and how they used the beginning part of the speech to set the tone for the movie. And then they came back to it at the end, which actually references the death of Brian Deneke. I thought that was absolute genius because they could have put it all out there in the front, but I think it would have kind of diluted what they were trying to do.
I agree.
Because you don't know why this clip is there necessarily. It's there because it's relevant, but then it's also there because it directly correlates to the story by referencing the specific event. And he talked a lot about what you talked about with, these kids are white, middle class kids. Why are they so angry? Is it because they're not good enough? They're always told they're not good enough. So I think that does play a dynamic to it. And, white middle class people generally get looked at, I would say looked down upon in society, because apparently we have all these advantages and yada, 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 yada. But I don't view life like that. Everyone has their own struggles. Are we a little better off than some people? Yeah. Are we not as well off as other people? Absolutely. But I don't know why the middle class seems to get the brunt of the hate in this country.
Yeah. I just think at the end of the day, no matter what, and I thought the movie did a good job of this, and I know I've already said it, but it's true, is that regardless of where your lot in life is economically, right, or whatever, the fact is, if you come from a loving home with loving parents, no matter what you look like on the outside, no matter where you go with your direction of your life, you're more than likely going to end up in a much better spot later in life, opposed to having a family who you have a dysfunctional family, you're missing a parent, you have your parents are horrible people, they treat you like garbage or whatever. Then I don't care how great you are, how financially well off you are. If you have awful parents, an awful upbringing, then you're probably going to be in a lot worse spot in life than you are of a kid who is lower income, who have two loving parents who've taken care of you their whole life, did their best they could to get you out the door, to give the best start you have. I mean, I think we all can look at families people who come from great families, no matter what their economic situation was, and that they had a different type of view of life. And then you can look at, we have friends or family members that we've seen who had everything they ever possibly could have handed to them, but because their parents were pieces of garbage, or they didn't have a parent or whatever, that they turned out completely different. Now, of course, we can always say there's this one-if situation off, this one-off here, this example here, but overall, my personal friends and my family I've seen over my course of my life, from lower income to rich, parents who were involved in their children's lives were way better off every time they developed a completely wonderful human being 9 times out of 10. And the kids and the friends I knew, family members I knew, who parents weren't ever there. They were absent parents. They weren't there at all. They were missing altogether. Their parents were drug addicts, drunks. They weren't really parental figures at all. Those kids turned out way worse, as a rule. So I think this movie did a good job of showing that most of these kids came from good homes, But unfortunately, the pressures of those families sometimes are greater than other families. And I think that's where you see that breakup is. And we talked about already, so I won't rehash that, but I think that a lot of that shows that these aren't kids that were coming from the poverty road, or whatever. So,
well, we live in a society that likes to put a label on everything. And if you put a label on something, that you're separating it from everything else.
Yes.
And it causes division. I don't know where this idea to label everything came from. It's just kind of the world we live in.
It's easy to put people in their boxes, and Americans like to do that because it makes it easier to digest who that person is. Because it takes out a lot of the guesswork of getting to know that person. If you're like, oh, this kid's just some punk kid, this kid's some, this is just some, black kid, this is just some rich white kid, or this is just some, weird, alternative lifestyle kid. It's just so easy to put them in these boxes, and not to get to know them as a person. I can like people for whatever their background is, but I can also not like them for whatever their background is equally. It's about the individual and not about where they came from or what they look like. It's about the individual. And I think if we're all honest with ourselves, you want everybody to give you the benefit of the doubt. I can easily turn a lot of people off by what I say or how I act, but at least they don't like me because of me, not because of what I look like. And I would like that to be able, I think we all can, as we're adults, it's easier to say that. But when you're a kid, it's hard to do that. And some adults never grow out of it. That's the problem, So, I mean, but I think overall, like you said, I thought the movie was great. It's a movie that is definitely, you and I were talking, I said, you and I were getting ready for the show. And I was sitting there thinking, this is the kind of movie that I think would be important to have high school kids watch. I think if they watch this in a sociology class, it would be perfect. Because honestly, it really shows you, I feel like a quasi-realistic snapshot of what a lot of kids go through.
They said that after this event transpired, the attitudes in Amarillo changed dramatically. And
how could it not?
Right.
I mean, it's how could it not? So, yeah.
But I'd say the only other couple things that I didn't really care for, sometimes the cinematography was a little over the top with the lens flares and things like that. And I'm like, production team, you don't have to always show us that you're there. We know you're there.
Right. Hey guys, we're here. Don't forget us.
Yeah. And then the very end of the movie, when it goes through what his charges were and basically nothing happened to him, they had this film montage. And it was almost seizure inducing, because the pictures move so fast. I think that could have been done a little better by slowing it down. So you can have some context, because they pop up and disappear so fast, you can't really even tell what's going on.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think it would have been cool if they would have made it more of a memoriam in that regard. And even if they could have put side-by-side comparisons of the actor and the real life person, because like I said, I think the casting director did a really good job finding these specific people.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I agree with the very end montage. Like I said, even though I appreciated it, I felt like it was the hectic feel of a punk rock show, which is what they were going for. But I feel like at the end of the movie, like you said, maybe they should have done a different, they could play the music over it, but slow the images down to kind of give you a better vibe of what, because it was the way it looked like it was all real home videos that they shot and these kids took during that, couple years that they were all there together. I mean, it didn't feel like it was, something, manufactured for the movie. So I agree with that. But I mean, yeah, I mean, I really don't have anything bad to say about it. Like you said, there's some pacing issues. I felt like there were a couple of scenes that were kind of pacing, like, and I understand that they're trying to make you like the characters more, but like the whole thing with them introducing the puppy dog to make you care about them, like want to take care of the little doggy and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, and I understand what that's about, but I mean, at the same time, I was like, there's a couple of extra scenes in there for that, and I'm like, all right, we could have cut out the dog stuff and still got the same vibe, and that would have saved the 3 or 4 minutes here or whatever of like conversing about naming the dog and all this jazz. But overall, like I said, I mean, aside from this, like, I mean, I feel like the movie was such a great movie. I'm kind of like nitpicking at this point because it honestly is not a movie where you're like going to be sitting there going like, wow, that was a glaring mistake. Like, how terrible was this? It was nothing like that. But yeah, man, I thought overall it was a really good movie, and I really liked the fact that they kept it based in like what I felt like was a reality. I know I've said that before, but when I watched this movie, I did not feel like this was some sort of polished Hollywood movie with like big star actors that were like, just, getting paid like $50,000 or $1 million or whatever just to show up and do like a 3-minute scene or whatever and then hop out. It was like, felt real gritty. It felt kind of almost like a documentary in some spots. So.
But it didn't feel like an indie film.
No, it did not. Yeah, that's the thing. It was definitely well made without it feeling like it was well made, I guess. Like, it didn't feel, like I said, super polished, which, again, I think could hinder a movie like that. It's like, I don't want to see Texas Chainsaw Massacre in 4K. It takes away from the grittiness of the movie. Like, I want to feel like I'm watching like a home movie. That's the way. And that's what this kind of, exactly. You're like, get the fluffer. No. So, but yeah, I mean, I felt like this movie was like that, where, it felt gritty. It had some polish definitely to it, but it didn't take away from the film. So, I mean, I would definitely recommend it. I'm sure you probably will too. I'll leave that here to you in a second, but I would say if you like a gritty, true life story, if you have Tubi or other streaming platforms, Bomb City was, in my opinion, there's way worse ways to spend your time, hour and a half or whatever, of your time than watch a movie like this. I will say it also leaves you a little bit angry and disgusted, just for the pure fact that it actually happened and that justice definitely was not served, I feel, in this scenario. But I think overall it was a really good kind of peek behind the curtain of what certain people in certain walks of life go through.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend this one too. And it provokes so many questions and makes you reevaluate how you view the world that's around you, because it's easy to make rash decisions, like you said, putting people in boxes. Like, you see parts of this person, then you automatically assume they fit in this box here or they fit in this box here. But I think it causes us to take a step back and really look at somebody holistically, rather than, taking superficial things such as appearance as your final judgment.
Right.
And I think if you like this movie, then I would definitely recommend like SLC Punk, Suburbia. Those are the two that come to mind.
Yeah. I agree with you. SLC Punk, Matthew Lillard, great one right there. So, but yeah, man, I think I think it was a good one to jump off of. I will say, you and I've talked a little bit about this. We're gonna talk about movies on a regular basis. I like the idea of doing different movies, different genres, different types of films. I know that myself and Chris have talked a lot about kind of different directions we want to go, different topics we want to cover, and we're gonna do, I think, a show. We're gonna do a video where we kind of just talk about that more in detail. So if you like this, awesome. I'm glad you liked it. I think Chris and I want to do other movies that are serious based, a little bit more like deep dives. But I also like to do movies that are gonna be just like fun movies to watch, and maybe not so like earth shattering, like soul crushing, like this one might be. So, because afterwards, I feel like you need to take a shower after this movie, quite frankly. So, man, what about you, dude? What are kind of your closing thoughts or whatnot about this?
I think I'm good.
There you go, dude. But all right, man. Well, I guess that's it. So I want to first say for myself, thank you for watching. If you made it this far, hopefully myself and Chris gave you a reason to go check that movie out. It's currently free, so if you have Tubi, definitely catch it there on Tubi. But I think it's like I said, a great film. Hope you all enjoyed what we did, and we look forward to seeing more from us in the coming days and weeks as we continue to grow the channel and see where the direction leads us.
Yeah. So if you're still here, you are the real hero. I think we're closing on like an hour. Yeah, we've been going for a while, but
Wow.
yeah, we may have to make it a two-parter, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. I mean, there you go. The content for everybody. Build that content up.
Our analysis is as long as the movie.
Exactly. We can. This could be a companion piece. This when they do the Blu-ray, the 4K, they'll do this as a companion piece. So, oh man, dude. Well, again, thanks for watching, guys, and we look forward to doing more of these in the future. So, thank you very much.